Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. As we know, the month of Ramadan is coming up. And in the month of Ramadan, we tend to increase our dua and our attention towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala much more than normal. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that when a person, he breaks his iftar, at the time of his iftar, the dua is certainly accepted. Today's talk is going to be about this subject, that what du'as are accepted and what du'as are not accepted. The criteria is basically that the understanding we should have is that all du'as are accepted, and that is with certain rules and regulations which I'll talk about in a minute. But the bottom line is that a practicing Muslim who is staying away from haram and he is living a good and pious lifestyle, his dua is going to be accepted. And the dua's acceptance is not necessarily in the shape of getting the thing that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. The dua is accepted in one of three ways. Either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives exactly what we want. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a particular job and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us that job. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us something better that is better for us and we don't realize it. In that case, we don't even know that the dua has been accepted, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaces that dua with something better. And thirdly, we don't get anything in this world, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us something in return in the hereafter. And that is something that we are guaranteed to get, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ad-du'a'u hiya al-ibadah." Dua is a form of ibadah. We should not regard it as just an invocation, just as a plea to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is something that we are actually getting rewarded for. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. So something I hinted at earlier was that the du'as are not accepted when a person, he is indulging in the consumption of haram. The Prophet ﷺ, he was asked by Sahabi, Ya Rasulullah, Udu'u Allah an akuna mustajab ad-da'awat, that, oh Allah, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I become a person whose du'as are accepted. So the Prophet, he gave him one simple diagnosis. He said, Atib mat'amak takun mustajab ad-du'a, that purify your food, purify your consumption, you will become a person whose du'as are accepted. And then there's a very lengthy hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he says that a person, he makes a long journey, he raises his hands towards the sky and he says, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi. And the reality is that his consumption is haram, his clothing is haram, and his nutrition that he eats is haram. So how is his dua going to be accepted? This is the wording of the Prophet ﷺ, Anna yustajabu lidhalik, how is his dua going to be accepted? So this is a question that we need to ask ourselves, what is our earning? And then that will be the answer, that is the reason that our du'as are not being accepted. Also, we have to keep in mind that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the du'as are accepted ma lam yastahsir, that as long as a person, he doesn't lose hope in the dua. And according to another riwayah, ma lam yasta'jil, as long as a person is not impatient. And what is the definition of impatience? The Prophet ﷺ, he highlighted that a person, he says that I made dua and I don't see it being accepted. So this is the definition of impatience. So just as a summary, we should always have hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, number one, He is going to accept our dua. Number two, we have to purify our consumption, our earnings. And thirdly, we have to always retain that hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that those du'as are going to be accepted in one way or the other, either by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving us what we want or replacing it, inshallah, with something better. I pray that Allah gives me and you the tawfiq to make the correct types of dua.